unknown probabilities. Can you see my PPT?
കാണാം സാറേ.
So one of the meaning of the term research is a scientific inquiry. Research is a scientific inquiry. So mainly there are two types of inquiry, census inquiry and sampling inquiry. In census inquiry, we get information from all the units included in the population. And it has its own drawback. The time, effort, cost, these three elements are very high in census inquiry. Therefore, there is an alternative method of inquiry that is called sampling. And in sampling, what we will do? We study only a part of the population. Say, for example, one of the topic of research in marketing, customer satisfaction of banking industry. Large number of customers, crores and crores of customers availing banking services from different banks functioning in our state. Therefore, the population is very large. Sometimes the population is nearing to infinity. Therefore, it is very difficult to collect the information from all the customers of the banking industry. Therefore, there is an alternative method of inquiry that is called sampling. So in sampling, we study only a part of the population. A fixed number of units may be selected from among all the units in the population. In this example, firstly, we fix the sample size. Then the number of samples, adequate number of samples, or the optimal number of samples have been selected from the population. So what is the meaning of the term population and what is the meaning of the term sampling? I have already mentioned sampling is a study of a part of the population. So population here means the universe of the units from which the sample is to be selected. In our example, the population consisting of all the customers of the banking industry. The population is nearing to infinity, or the population is very large. So it is very difficult to collect information from all the customers of the banking industry. So that is why there is an alternative method of inquiry that the researcher has to choose sampling. So here the population is defined as the universe of the units from which the sample is to be selected. In other words, a collection of items about which some inference is to be made. So we collect information from the sample respondents, then analyze it, and we have certain conclusion based on the sample statistic. And based on the sample statistic, we generalize it. Or we draw certain inference about the characteristics of the population from where we draw the sample. But what is the meaning of the term sample? A segment of the population that is selected for investigation. So research is actually an investigation. A part of the population is selected upon which we conduct the investigation. So sample is a subset of the population, it is a part of the population. In simple words, a part of the population is a sample. So there is a question you can expect in the coursework. What is sampling? Sampling is the process of selecting a part of the population to make inference about the characteristics of the population. In our earlier example, our population consisting of large number of customers, cross and cross of customers, population is nearing to infinity, and the population is very large. Therefore, the researcher is very difficult to collect information from all the customers in the banking industry. Therefore, for your study, we fix a sample size, optimum sample size, and the samples have been selected from the population. Sample customers will be selected from the population and collects data. Therefore, this meaning indicates the process of selecting a part of the population. That means selection of sample respondents from the population and collect information and to make the characteristics of the population, generalize the characteristics of the population. So, for example, in our study, that means the title I have already explained, customer satisfaction of banking industry, population is very large. And the sample size fixed to 1,000. From among the large number of customers, we have to select 1,000 sample customers. And different methods are applicable for the selection of sample for the population. Our sample size is 1,000. Then we collect the information from the 1,000 customers. And based on the information or the data we collected from 1,000 customers, we analyze it with appropriate statistical method. And definitely we have some findings or conclusion based on the sample study. And this conclusion or finding shall be used for predicting the behavior of the population from where we draw our sample. So technically we speak, sample statistics shall be utilized for predicting the unknown value of the population. Sample study findings and conclusion shall be utilized for generalizing the characteristics or behavior of the population from where we draw our sample. And in this example, our optimum sample size 1,000. We identify 1,000 sample customers from the population. Based on the information furnished by them, we get the data analyzed. Then definitely we have certain findings based on the sample study. And this finding shall be utilized for predicting the behavior of the customers of all the banking industry or customers who are included in the population. So that is why, technically speaking or statistically we speak, sample statistic shall be utilized for predicting the unknown value of the population parameter. Sample findings shall be utilized for predicting the behavior or characteristics of the entire units in the population. So that is the meaning of sample, technical meaning of the term sampling. So there are two assumptions or conditions upon which the sample study has been chosen by the researcher. Two conditions are there. The parent population from where the sample have been drawn are normally distributed. The population and the samples have been drawn from the population, and the parent population from where the sample have been drawn is normally distributed. The normal distribution is associated with the sampling. I will explain the characteristics of the normal distribution later. Then the sample selected will be the true representative of the population, because sample is a part of the population. Therefore, the sample units must represent the population. And these two conditions are validated at the time of choosing a sample study in your research. And why sample study is obtained? What are the reasons why a researcher chosen a sample study? Lower cost, the cost will be the minimum. Greater accuracy of result because we fix the sample size, optimal sample size statistically, and which ensures more accuracy of results. Speed of data collection, because the sample size is the optimum. And the sample is a part of the population. That is why we have to determine the characteristics, elements of the population. So availability of population elements are also included in the sample study. So these are the reasons why a researcher choose sample study for your research. So another type of inquiry I have already mentioned, the census. And this study involving all the elements in the population. We collect information from almost all the units in the population. Or our study or our inquiry covers all the elements of the population. And this is an inquiry is opted only when the population is very small. If your population is very small, definitely we can use census inquiry. And at the same time, census inquiry is essential when elements are quite different from each other. So these are the conditions or situation under which we can use census inquiry. So before opting a sampling inquiry, definitely the researcher should understand what is the characteristics of the population. What is the type of population? So the population may be mainly classified into two, finite, infinite. That means non-population and unknown population. So what is the characteristics of finite population? If you have a population in which the units are countable, we can say that this is a finite population. Say for example, the total number of students in the postgraduate department of commerce of SD College. Different programs are there. BCom, 2 batches I think, MCom, then PhD. So the total number of students studied in the postgraduate department of commerce of SD College, the population is finite. The population is known to the researcher. So at that time, the value of the population parameter can be estimated. We can easily estimate the value of the population parameter. So for example, the average height of all the students studying in the Department of Commerce of SD College. You have the list, you have the source list, which includes the name and address of each and every student in your department. So the population is very clear, population is finite, known to the researcher. So that is why we can calculate the population parameter very easily. But sometimes the population is infinite or unknown. The earlier example, the population is infinite, nearing to infinity. Total number of customers in the banking industry of our state. Population is very large, sometimes nearing to infinity, and population is unknown to the researcher. Therefore, the population parameter can be estimated, but it is very difficult. So these are the two types of population that shall be identified by the researcher at the time of conducting a sampling inquiry. Again, the population is classified into two, homogeneous and heterogeneous population. In the homogeneous population, the characteristics of all the units in the population are similar. Say for example, in your department, 200 students are studying. They study the BCom subject or commerce subject. So, based on the nature of the subject they have been studying, definitely they have one common feature. So that is why we can say that the population is homogeneous. But we when take all the students of botany department, commerce department, and the Malayalam department together, the population is sometimes heterogeneous. Different types of students studying different subjects, their behaviors are different. So that is why then the population is called a heterogeneous. So homogeneous population and heterogeneous population. Again, based on our sample study, what is a good sample? Or the validity of sample study depends on accuracy and precision. If we need more accuracy in our result, especially when the data is analyzed, then sample study is appropriate. We need more precision in our output after getting the data analyzed. Definitely sampling inquiry is essential. So if we need more accuracy and more precision in our result, sampling inquiry is the best one instead of census inquiry. So there is a problem how to select the sample from the population. Sometimes the population is infinite or finite. Sometimes the population is homogeneous or heterogeneous. So how to select the sample from the population? And you can expect this question in the coursework. What are the methods of sampling or what are the techniques of sampling? So here, the total techniques and methods may be classified into two: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. There are many methods and techniques used for the selection of samples from the population, and the entire methods shall be categorized under two heads: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Firstly, we will discuss what is probability sampling. What is probability? Chance of the occurrence of a particular event. So when we apply the concept of probability at the time of the selection of the sample from the population, there is a theory of probability. Every unit in the population has an equal chance of being included in my sample. So for example, in your department, 250 students are studying for different programs: BCom, MCom, PhD. Out of the 250 students, I have to select 100 students. If I select 100 students, 100 sample students from among the 250 students studying in your department, when I apply the probability theory for the selection of the sample from the population, every student in your department has an equal chance of being included in my sample 100. So this is the application of probability at the time of the selection of the sample from the population. Otherwise, the selection of sample from the population at random, the word random means the application of probability at the time of the selection of sample from the population. So probability sampling means the selection of the sample based on random, or it is a controlled procedure because every unit in the population has an equal chance of being included. So this is a controlled procedure that assures a non-probability of the probability of the selection of each item. It is a random sample if all the items have equal chance of being selected. That is why I have already mentioned every unit in the population has an equal chance of being included in my sample. In this example, we have 250 students studying in your department, and every student has an equal chance of being included in my 100. So here, there is the application of the probability at the time of the selection of sample from the population. So steps in sample design. So there are different steps in research, starting from identification of a problem, define and redefine the problem, that means make the problem more clear. Then literature review, that is very, very important. Then variable identification, classify them into dependent and independent. Formulation of a hypothesis. So before that, there is a preparation of research design, which includes sample design. So sample design is a part of research design. And research design is a blueprint for the research. Before starting the actual research work, the researcher has to prepare a comprehensive plan, and that comprehensive plan is called a research design. And sample design is one of the components of research design. That is why sample design is a part of research design. It's a part of the biggest plan, comprehensive plan, research design. So steps in sample design, what are included in the sample design? What is the target population? So at the time of starting the research, especially after the literature review, the researcher has to define the population from where he has to draw the sample for his study. And what are the parameters of interest? Then what is the sample frame? The researcher has identified the characteristics of the units in the population. How many units are included in the population? And what is the appropriate sampling method, whether it is probability sampling or non-probability sampling? And what is the size of the sample? Researcher has to fix the optimal sample size. And all these are dependent on the nature of the problem the researcher has to study. In our earlier example, customer satisfaction of banks. Next one, job is another topic, job satisfaction of IT employees. Financial inclusion in Kerala. And the impact of economic variables on the functioning of states. So all these topics are different. The research problem in all these topics are different. Therefore, the sample design is fully dependent on the nature of the problem in the topic chosen by the researcher for his or her study. And another one, the sample design is guided by hypothesis. So after conducting extensive literature review, the researcher has to identify n number of dependent variable and independent variable and try to establish the relations. And after relationship is called a hypothesis. And this hypothesis determines the nature of the sample design. And again, a systematic statement of the population element and how the sample is to be selected, including the sample size. The population, characteristics of the population, the behavior of the population definitely determine which is the appropriate method of sampling, whether it is probability sampling or non-probability sampling. Sometimes the population is very large. Population is unknown to the researcher. Therefore, the researcher has to opt non-probability sampling, maybe judgment sampling, convenience sampling, purposive sampling, whatever it may be. Because he has no idea about the characteristic behavior of the population, from where we draw the sample. Therefore, it is impossible to apply non-probability sampling. And another important element at the time of the selection of the sample from the population is the variation. Variation in your data you will collect. Suppose in your data you have no variation. So for example, the average marks obtained by the students in your PG program for research methodology. And you classify your PG students into two categories, male and female. The average marks obtained by male students or boys for research methodology, 65 percentage. Average marks obtained by girl students, again 65%. Can you compare? No. Comparison is impossible here. Why? Because the average marks obtained by boys and girls, 65 is no variation in your data. So comparison is impossible. And finding is impossible. Conclusion is impossible. So, if you have to expect a meaningful result in your research, definitely you can have enough variation in your data. If you have no variation in your data, the findings and conclusion is very difficult. The conclusion is meaningless. Therefore, the researcher has to ensure adequate amount of variation in the data collected. Then the researcher has to generalize or interpret the research in a better way. So, important criteria should be kept in mind at the time of the selection of sample from the population is the variation of all the elements in the population. So here, the methods may again classified into two: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. And the probability sampling includes simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, and cluster sampling, stratified random sampling, double sampling. And non-probability techniques include convenience sampling, purposely sampling, judgment sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. In some of the referred textbook, you can see the quota sampling and snowball sampling come under non-probability sampling. But as a researcher, having more than 25 years of experience in this field, I should say that the quota sampling and snowball sampling definitely will come under probability, and I will explain why these two techniques are coming under probability sampling later. Coming to simple random sampling, one of the method or technique comes under probability sampling. And the simple random sampling is applied only when the population is finite. There are three conditions upon which this probability sampling technique, simple random sampling, is applied for the selection of the sample from the population. Three conditions are satisfied. The first condition, population is finite or small. You can apply simple random sampling for the selection of the sample from the population only when the population is finite or small. And next one, this method is applied only when the population is homogeneous. And all the units in the population has the similar characteristic, same behavior. That is why we can say that the population is homogeneous. Then we can apply simple random sampling for the selection of the population. And the conditions are availability of sources. Since the population is finite, definitely the source. The details regarding are the units included in the population, such details are known to the researcher, then only the simple random sampling will be applied. So we have three conditions to be fulfilled for the application of simple random sampling at the selection of the sample from the population. The first one, population is finite or small. Second, the population shall be homogeneous, and the availability of source list must be enhanced by the researcher. Then we can apply this technique for the selection of the sample from the population. Random sampling, and this method is applied on there is ensure the homogeneity is satisfying the population. I think you have some. 1 minute. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any disturbance of echo? No.
Now, sir.
Yes.
Any disturbance? Okay, okay. So the second method is stratified random sampling, and this method is applied only when the population is heterogeneous. So heterogeneity in the population means all the characteristics of the units included in the population are not similar. Therefore, in order to ensure homogeneity, we divide the entire population into different groups. Each group is called a strata. So definitely, n number of groups exist in the population. We identify such a group. Each group is called a strata. So in this example, here the population is heterogeneous. Therefore, we divide the entire population into 4 groups, and each group is called strata. We have strata 1, strata 2, strata 3, and strata 4. 4 groups we identified in the population. From each group or each strata, we select the required number of sample. The sample have been drawn from each strata, each group. Strata 1, strata 2, strata 3, and strata 4. And finally, all the units selected from each strata constitute our optimum sample size. But this method is applied only when the population is heterogeneous, and this method is applied only for ensuring the homogeneity in the population. And here, there is the application of simple random sampling, where in the stratified random sampling itself, there will be the application of simple random sampling. Where? Because at the time of the selection of sample from each strata, there is the application of simple random sampling. And again, cluster sampling. And this method is applied only when the population is very large. Normally, when the population is very large, definitely we apply the cluster sampling. But there is a difference between cluster sampling and stratified random sampling. You can expect this question in your coursework. What is the difference between cluster sampling and stratified random sampling? In the stratified random sampling, the population is homogeneous. In order to ensure, in the case of stratified random sampling, the population is heterogeneous. And in order to ensure the homogeneity, we divide the population into different groups. Each group is called strata. But here, the cluster sampling is applied only when the population is very large. Sometimes the population is homogeneous. And here, we divide the entire population into different groups. Each group is called a cluster instead of strata. Here, each group is called a cluster. And in this example, the population is divided into 5 groups: cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, cluster 4, and cluster 5. We selected 2 clusters at random. I selected cluster 2 and cluster 4. I didn't select cluster 1, cluster 3, and cluster 5, because the selection of cluster is at random. That means there is the application of simple random sampling. The probability concept is applied here for the selection of cluster. I select cluster 2 and cluster 4. And all the units included in the selected cluster will become my sample size. So here, the optimal sample size is selected from only 2 clusters. I have not collected or selected any item from cluster 1, cluster 3, and cluster 5. But in the earlier example, from each strata, that means strata 1, strata 2, strata 3, and strata 4, required number of sample have been selected at random. But in this case, I select cluster 2 and cluster 4, and all the units included in the cluster 2 and cluster 4 will become my sample size, optimal sample size. At the time of the selection of these two clusters, cluster 2 and cluster 4 at random, definitely cluster 1 and cluster 3 and cluster 5 is eliminated. That is why there is the application of probability at the time of the selection of cluster here. Next one, multistage random sampling. And this technique is applied only when the population is very large. Again, when your population is very, very large, that means nearing to infinity, the multistage random sampling is applied. So, how to apply this multistage random sampling? And normally, many questions have been asked to the researcher when they present the abstract of the thesis at the time of pre-submission seminar or open defense. What is your sample method? What is your sampling method? Some of the researchers say that, sir, multi-stage random sampling. So how many stages through which you select the sample? And he or she will not answer such question. Therefore, the methods of sampling is very, very important in research. So here, the multi-stage random sampling is applied only when the population is very large. And here I will show one example. Customer satisfaction of public and private sector banks in Kerala. Large number of customers avail banking services from public and private sector banks functioning in our state. Large number of banks functioning in our state. For the purpose of selecting optimal sample customers from the population, there is a first stage. In the first stage, I divide the state of Kerala into 3 regions: South, Central, North. Then I select one district from South, Trivandrum, at random. From Central I select Ernakulam. From North I select Calicut. The first stage is over. In the second stage, I select one public sector bank at random. One private sector bank at random. From each district selected from each zone. Then, in the public sector bank, I select SBI at random. Private sector bank, I select ICICI at random. Second stage is over. And the third stage, I select one branch of each bank selected from public and private. I select one branch from SBI belonging to public sector bank from Trivandrum district in the southern region. And here I select the branch of SBI University campus. Private, one of the branch of ICICI, I select Statue branch, Secretariat branch. Similarly, in Quota, I select Kanyakudi SBI and ICICI of Quota town. From the Calicut northern region, I select Kundamangalam SBI and Valiyangadi ICICI. The fourth stage is over. And the total number of customers of the branches selected from public and private sector bank, selected public sector and private sector bank, constitute the target population. So here, the biggest population, the population nearing to infinity, is divided into or converted into a small target population through different stages, 4 stages. Then my optimum sample size is 1000 customers. Here, in this stage, or from the targeted population, the biggest population is converted into target population. And from the target population, I have to select 1000 customers. This is our optimum sample size. So, again, my question, what we will do in the application of multi-stage random sampling? In the multi-stage random sampling, the biggest population is converted into a target population, a small population, through passing through different stages. Here, 4 stages are required for the conversion of the biggest population into a target population. And finally, we draw required number of samples from the target population. So this is the application of multi-stage random sampling. But unfortunately, majority of the research scholars at the time of the presentation in the open defense or pre-submission seminar failed to answer the exact application or the exact way in which the application of multi-stage random sampling in their study. Next is systematic sampling. See, the systematic sampling is one of the technique, comes under probability sampling. Here, 3 conditions are to be satisfied for the selection of the sample from the population. One is, there will be affinity population. The population is known to the researcher. And first sample is selected at random from the population. And remaining samples were selected at regular sample intervals. Say, for example, one of the study, work-life balance of women gynecologists in Kerala. Work-life balance of women gynecologists in Kerala. One of the study conducted by a teacher and submitted in Kerala University for the award of the PhD. And this topic is related to HR, work-life balance. And we have 1,500 women gynecologists working in different hospitals in Kerala. Private hospital and government hospital. And the sample size fixed for the study is 300. So the researcher has to identify or select 300 gynecologists from among 1,500 gynecologists, women gynecologists working in different hospitals functioning in Kerala. Therefore, the sample interval is 1,500, the total gynecologists working in different hospitals in Kerala, divided by our optimum sample size fixed 300. Therefore, the sample interval is equal to 5. And how to apply this systematic random sampling for the selection of the sample? The first sample is selected at random. So here, if we select 10 the unit at random from the list of 1,500, we have the source list. That means we have the list showing 1,500 gynecologists are working, their name, their address, their phone number, everything. That means the population is very clear. Population is finished. And we select the first gynecologist at random. That means there is the application of probability at the time of the selection of the first sample. And the first sample will be the 15th unit, 15th gynecologist in our list. We select that gynecologist and she is 15th in the list. Then based on the class interval 5 or the sample interval 5, we have to select the 20th gynecologist from the list. Again, we have to select the 25th gynecologist because the class interval is 5. The sample interval is 5. Again, we have to select the 30th gynecologist in the list. And if we follow this procedure, definitely we have to select 300, sample gynecologists from among 1,500 gynecologists working in our state. 3 conditions are to be satisfied. The population must be finite or clear, and first sample is selected at random, and remaining samples have been selected based on a sample interval, and here the sample interval is calculated by using a formula: total number of units in the population divided by sample size fixed, optimal sample size fixed, and the first unit is selected at random. At that time only we have to apply the probability concept for the selection of the sample. Again, non-probability sampling. The non-probability sampling means there is no application of probability at the time of the selection of sample from the population. The selection of the sample is fully dependent on the convenience, purpose, and judgment of the researcher. Say, I have to select some units from the population. Based on my convenience, I select it. There is no application of probability for the selection of the sample from the population. I have a purpose for which I select the sample. I have certain judgment based on the characteristics of the population. Therefore, I purposefully select certain number of units from the population as my sample. That means there is no application of probability at the time of the selection of sample from the population. That is why such methods are known as non-probability sampling. Then again, quota and snowball. Theoretically, quota sampling and snowball sampling come under non-probability. But practically, what is quota sampling? My sample size is 1,000, in which I fix a quota for a particular group. Out of the 1,000 optimal sample size, definitely 30% must be the sample ladies. So 30% is the quota fixed for a particular group, females. And based on the selection at random, sometimes the researcher, after a random selection, then it shall be the probability sampling. Similarly, in snowball sampling, we select the first unit, first respondent at random, then collect information. Based on the information furnished by the first respondent, definitely we know that more information can be given by another respondent. So the ball is rolling from one point to another point. And if we select the first respondent at random, definitely this technique comes under probability sampling. So another important question you can expect in your examination: what is sample size determination? Sample size must be optimum, not to be very high or not to be very large and not to be very small. It must be optimum. Why? Because it is a mathematical estimation of the number of units to be included in a study. The sample size shall be fixed based on certain formula applied mathematically or statistically. Normally, you can expect a question: how did you fix your sample size? At the time of the open defense or pre-submission seminar? Definitely, the researcher answers such questions. Sir, I have applied this formula. What is the relevance of this formula? He or she will not answer. So basically, there are n number of formulas available for the fixation of the optimal sample size. And some of the softwares definitely will give you the optimum number of sample size. Nowadays, there are certain options in the softwares for the fixation of optimal sample size. But the sample size shall be fixed based on some formula that formula must indicate the characteristics of the population. Otherwise, there is a need for pilot study, pilot investigation, and the information collected through pilot study shall be used for the fixation of optimal sample size. Then only we can say that the sample must be the true representative of the population. The sample size will be the optimum that shall represent the population. So, for the fixation of optimal sample size, there are certain statistical and mathematical formulas. When the representative sample is taken from population, the findings are generalized to the population. I have already mentioned what we will do in sampling. Sample statistic is used for predicting the unknown value of the population parameter. And optimal sample size determination is required for the following reason. If the sample size is optimum, not to be very high or large, not to be very small, it must be optimum because it ensures appropriate analysis. The analysis is meaningful only when you have optimal sample size. To provide the desired level of accuracy, if you get 100% accuracy in your result, and for the prediction of the characteristics of the population, definitely the sample size will be the optimum. And finally, in order to test your hypothesis or validate your hypothesis, definitely the sample size must be the optimum. So these are the reasons why we fix the optimum sample size. Then if the sample size is not optimum, what will happen? The study will be difficult and costly, time constrained, and sometimes there is a loss of accuracy. You cannot get precision and accuracy in your result. Provided if the sample size is optimum, definitely you can ensure more accuracy and precision in your statistical tests. So many formulas are there, Cochrane formula, Easter score formula, but this formula is very, very important for the fixation of optimal sample size. N, optimal sample size, determined by 1.96, that the table value of Z at 5% level of significance. S, standard error square divided by D. Estimate of the standard deviation S. D means the standard error of the estimation of the population parameter. And this is the only formula which indicates the characteristics of the population. And this formula is applied against the data collected through pilot study. In the pilot study, what the researcher will do? The researcher tries to identify the characteristics of the population from where he has to draw the sample for his or her study even before the study starts. That is why it is called a pilot study. The pilot study information is used for the application of this formula for the fixation of optimal sample size, because that is why this formula is called the appropriate formula for the fixation of optimum sample size. See, so the first step is over. I explain the method of sampling. My sample is chosen by what is the need for the optimal sample size, and what is the formula for the application of what is the formula for the determination of optimal sample size. Again, the next part of my hypothesis formulation and its testing, and this will indicate which is the appropriate statistics or the techniques of statistics for testing of your hypothesis, especially with the analysis of data. See, what is the meaning of the type hypothesis? You can see many meaning in the referred textbook written by different authors on research methodology. So hypothesis means a predictive statement that stands to be validated. It is a predictive statement which shows or which indicates the solution to a research problem, or it is a tentative solution to the research problem. But practically or statistically, we mean the time hypothesis assumed a relationship between dependent variable and independent variable. Otherwise, it is called a statistical hypothesis. Which means, if you formulate a hypothesis that must indicate the relationship between dependent variable and independent variable, the relationship between dependent variable and independent variable is otherwise called a cause and effect relationship. If you have no cause and effect relationship in your hypothesis, that hypothesis is not to be said like a hypothesis, but it is only a statement which cannot be termed as a hypothesis. So in order to formulate a valid hypothesis, there will be the cause and effect relationship between dependent variable and independent variable. So for example, job satisfaction is influenced by superior subordinate relations. Job satisfaction is the dependent variable, superior subordinate relationship is the independent variable. Customer satisfaction is affected by good quality products, lower prices, cheaper prices, and consumer income and advertisement expenditure. So here, customer satisfaction is the dependent variable, and the good quality products, cheaper prices, then consumer income and advertisement expenditure. These four are the independent variable. And here, the customer satisfaction is the effect. All other variables are termed as causes. So there will be a cause and effect relationship you can establish in a particular statement. Then that statement is said to be a hypothesis. And I will show three types of hypotheses here. There is no dependence between the income of an individual and the purchasing behavior. So here the purchasing behavior is a dependent variable and income of an individual is a dependent variable. There is a cause and effect relationship here. And what about the third hypothesis? There is no significant variation in the satisfaction level of the customers of different area. Customer satisfaction is the dependent variable and the customers of different area is the independent variable. Customer loyalty. And brand equity is the dependent variable. All other three factors, customer satisfaction, customer trust, and customer loyalty, are the independent variables. So based on these three hypotheses, what we will test in the first case, there is no dependence between the income of an individual and the purchasing behavior. We have to test the dependence here. Dependence between two variables, purchasing behavior and income of an individual. Purchasing behavior is a dependent variable, income of individual and is an independent variable. So the statistical hypothesis is validated only for proving or testing the dependence. Second one, there is no significant variation in the satisfaction level of the customers of different area. Customer satisfaction is the dependent variable which is influenced by the impact of different area. That is an independent variable. Here, we test variation. The first hypothesis, we test the dependence between two variables. And the second hypothesis, we test the variation of one variable in terms of another. And the third hypothesis, brand equity is independent of the customer satisfaction, customer trust, and customer loyalty. So here the brand equity is the outcome, the effect, the dependent variable, which is influenced by three factors: customer satisfaction, customer trust, and customer loyalty. These three are the independent variable, otherwise called causes. Cause and effect relationship. So there is a question, when will the hypothesis be formulated? Hypothesis ever formulating. So there are three stages in which the hypothesis can be formulated. Stage one, at the time of literature review. So literature review is one of the essential elements of a researcher. The researcher reviews as many literature available, definitely he can solve the research problem partly. At the time of literature review, the researcher has to identify n number of variables classified into dependent and independent and try to establish different types of relationship. Sometimes the relationship is a network of relationship. Sometimes the relationship may be the chain of relationship. So, for example, many factors affecting purchasing behavior. If a particular customer purchases a particular product and he is satisfied, definitely he has more trust and loyalty towards the product and the company. Therefore, the brand equity will be very high. If the brand equity is very high, the company is thinking of extending the brand. That is the brand extension. So, there are certain variables that are connected to each other. Many factors influencing purchasing behavior. If a particular product is purchased by the customer and gets satisfied, there is customer satisfaction, positive customer satisfaction, which will result in customer trust. Again, the consequence of customer trust will be the customer loyalty. And the customer trust and customer loyalty will determine customer brand equity. And finally, if the brand equity is very high, definitely the company is thinking of extending the brand extension. So there is a chain of relationship, network of relationship among certain variables identified by the researcher through literature review. That is why literature review is very, very important. So hypothesis can be formulated at the time of the literature review. Again, hypothesis may be formulated at the time of variable identification. Variables may be identified through literature review and classified into dependent and independent variables. Then try to establish certain relations. Such assumed relationship will be proved with the data. But unfortunately, majority of the research scholars prepare a questionnaire or interview schedule, then collect the data and get the data analyzed, and based on the result of the analysis, he or she has to frame the hypothesis. This is a wrong method. That means hypothesis shall be formulated at the time of literature review. That is the correct method for the formulation of hypothesis. Because at the time of review, a number of variables have been identified and classified into dependent and independent, then try to establish a relation. Such a relationship will be proved with data by the application of statistical method. This is a correct method of formulation of hypothesis. But unfortunately, almost all the research scholars formulate their hypothesis after getting the data analyzed. Wrong method. And type of analysis. So, to prove or validate a hypothesis is essential. Data may be transferred into and based on the application of statistical method for testing a hypothesis, the analysis may be transferred into univariate analysis. Bivariate, two variable analysis, one must be dependent, another must be multivariate analysis, one dependent variable and more than one independent variable. See, univariate analysis, what is the example? Suppose I have only one variable, sale of a commodity for the last 10 years. Variable, sale of a commodity for the last 10 years. I can calculate statistics. I can predict the amount of sale. And I can calculate the compound growth rates. I can calculate standard deviation and variance. Sometimes coefficient of variation. Because I have only one variable analysis is called a univariate analysis. Bivariate, I have sales or demand for the commodity and price charged for the commodity for the last 10 years. So price influence demand. As the price goes up, demand will come down. Then if the price is coming down, it will go up. So there is a relationship between price and demand for the commodity. And demand is the consequence and price is the influencing factor. Therefore, this type of analysis is called a two-variable analysis, otherwise called a bivariate. Again, multivariate. Demand for the commodity, one variable, dependent variable, influenced by price target for the commodity, consumer income, and advertisement expenditure. These three factors affecting the demand. So we have one dependent variable, more than one independent variable. Therefore, this type of analysis is called a multivariate analysis. Again, this is very, very important. What are the bases of data analysis? You can expect this question for your coursework examination. So what is the need for analysis, or what is the need for testing a hypothesis? I have already mentioned, sometimes we have to prove, we have to validate the dependence between two variables included in your hypothesis, maybe cause and effect relationship or dependent variable, independent variable relationship. So we have to test the dependence. Then we have to test the variation of one variable in terms of another. And sometimes we have to create different groups in the population. There are many statistical methods for creation of certain number of groups in your population. So that is why grouping. So these three are the essential condition for which we do the data analysis. Or what are the basis of data analysis? They are the dependence, to prove the dependence, to test the variation, and to create many groups in the population. Another very, very important area we will discuss, the type of variable. See, mainly there are two types of variable, quantitative variable and qualitative variable. The price of a commodity for over the last 10 years, price is a variable that can be expressed numerically. Age of the students of PG program in SD college, definitely we can measure it. We can express it numerically. So this is a quantitative variable. The profit earned by public sector undertakings in Kerala, we can quantify. Therefore, such variables are called quantitative variable. But there are certain variables that cannot be measured. Such variables are called qualitative variable. Say, for example, customer satisfaction. We can't measure it. Job satisfaction, attitude of employees, perception of employees. So all these variables are in the nature of qualitative variables that cannot be expressed numerically. That is why such variables are called attributes. So qualitative variables are otherwise called attributes. But there is a question, sir. Why we include such a quantitative variable in the questionnaire for collection of data and get the data analyzed for meaningful results? This is a serious question. But theoretically, we say that qualitative variables are those variables that cannot be quantified. But for the data analysis and the data collected through questionnaire or interview schedules, such a data relating to qualitative variables shall be quantified, and that process is called measurement. So therefore, in research methodology, there is a separate module called measurement. That is very, very important module, measurement. How to measure a qualitative variable. There are different methods for measurement. Suppose, if we apply interval scale for the measurement based on 5-point scale or 7-point scale or even 10-point scale, Likkert's method, we can measure a qualitative variable. And that will be better explained in the workshop to be organized by your departments. How to measure a qualitative variable. Anyway, different scales are used for the measurement. Nominal, ordinal, interval, ordinal ranking, and ratio. These are the main scales used for the measurement of a qualitative variable or quantitative variable, whatever it may be. At the time of preparation of a questionnaire or interview schedule for the collection of data, definitely the researcher has to choose these 5 scales judiciously for the measurement. And I will show how these scales are used for the construction of a questionnaire or interview schedule for data collection. And such a scale will determine which is the appropriate method or statistical technique to do the analysis. See, you just observe this questionnaire. Work-life balance of women gynecologists. I have already mentioned this topic. Normally, when you construct a questionnaire, the first question is name of the respondent. And the name will not be used for analysis. Second question here, age. There is a classification. There is an interval. Age below 25, 25 to 35, 36 to 45, 46 to 55, above 55. So, 5 categories are here. Age is classified into 5 categories. So here, the scale used is nominal. So nominal scale is otherwise called a categorical scale. Similarly, age, qualification, number of years of experience, how many institutions have you worked in so far, monthly income, price of your stay, up to question number 70. That is number of transfers in your service. Not transfer, 1 transfer, 2 transfer, 3 transfer, more than 3 transfer. So up to question number 17, the scale usually is nominal. Nominal scale is otherwise called a categorical scale. When we use such a scale, definitely the population is categorized. Different groups can be identified through this categorization in the population. So here we use nominal scale, otherwise called categorical scale. But question number 18, do you feel any discomfort? So no? So no, those respondents who must say yes. And those customers or respondents who says no. 2 categories. But what is the extension of that question? If yes, please rank the following reason. And what is the need for using a ranking scale? Ranking scale is otherwise called ordinal ranking scale. If you have a question having multiple answers, definitely such a multiple answers shall be ranked to identify which is the most influencing answer. So here the scale used is ordinal ranking, and that can be used only when a question is having multiple answers. Then only we can use ordinal ranking scale. Then what about question number 19? See, many factors affecting the work-life imbalance of gynecologists. Here, one of the variable identified through literature review, bad environment climate in hospital affects the work-life balance. Or bad environment climate in hospital influence the work-life conflict of women gynecologists. And this variable is identified through literature review. And this variable is categorized as qualitative variable. Theory says that qualitative variable cannot be measured in numerical terms. But for the purpose of data collection and data analysis, and this variable shall be placed in the questionnaire, therefore that variable, that qualitative variable must be measured. And how it is possible? So here there are 4 statements upon which the response may be obtained from the selected gynecologist, selected sample gynecologist on a 7-point scale basis. 7 for strongly agree, 1 for strongly disagree. The actual response may be lie somewhere between 7 and 1. Here 4 statements are used for the measurement. Why we have not used 5 statement, or why we have not used 3 statement, and what is the reason or logic behind the use of 4 statement for the measurement of that qualitative variable on a 7-point scale basis? So here the 4 statements are highly reliable for the measurement of that qualitative variable bad environmental climate in hospital, because we apply reliability analysis. So reliability analysis is one of the statistical method which clearly indicate what are the optimum number of statements upon which the response may be obtained from the sample respondent on a 5-point scale or 7-point scale or 10-point scale, whatever it may be. So this is the way in which a qualitative variable can be measured statistically. So here we use interval scale. Here we use interval scale. So we have some idea about the use of nominal scale, scale, and what is the need for the use of ordinal ranking scale. Then what is the use of interval scale? So interval scale is mainly used for the measurement of a qualitative variable. Similarly, a number of variables are here. Now, peaceful ambience in hospital, immoral nature of work, impossibility of time management, job clarity, not job control, more number of patients. Many variables have been identified through literature review. All the variables are in qualitative nature. Therefore, such variables must be measured. After applying reliability analysis, which indicate as many statements are necessary for the measurement of a qualitative variable, either 7-point scale, 5-point scale, or even 10-point scale. So here we use interval scale, nominal scale, then ordinal ranking scale, interval scale. Then one more, clear ordinal. If I can express a variable quantitatively, then the scale usually is ordinal. Say for example, what is your age? One student says, my age is 22. Another student 21. Similarly, all the students can express their age numerically. Therefore, age is a variable and that can be expressed numerically. Therefore, the scale usually is ordinal. And the last scale is ratio. And ratio scale is normally used in agricultural research and medical research. Say for example, during winter season in Kashmir and Shimla, the temperature comes down to -5. And do you believe that even in -5 there is no temperature? Even at -5 there will be temperature. So ratio scale is not normally used in social science research. It can be used in medical research and agricultural research. So there are 4 scales mainly used in social science research: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ordinal ranking. Such a scale will determine which is the most appropriate statistical method to apply for testing of our hypothesis. I will show one table, 2 variable, which includes 2 variable. Type of hospital classified into government and private. Number of transfers, 5 categories of transfers. No transfer. Those gynecologists who have not get any transfer in their working life. 1 transfer, 2 transfer, 3 transfer, more than 3 transfers in their working life. So number of transfers, that variable is categorized. Type of hospital categorized into government and private. So here, number of transfers, type of hospital, 2 variables are there. 2 variables are in nominal scale because categorical scale. So what is the nature of the categorical scale or nominal scale? the nominal scale variable will give only frequency distribution. It will not give normal distribution. So that is a basic tree which determines which is the appropriate statistical method for data analysis. If you have two variables that are in categorical scale or nominal scale, such variable upon which the data will not give normal distribution, such data will give only frequency distribution. That is very important. See, here the total sample size 340. Optimum sample size 340. Out of the 340, 210 gynecologists were working in private hospital, 130 gynecologists working in government hospital. Out of the 340, 110 gynecologists have no transfers in their working life. 73 gynecologists have no transfer in their working life. And 46 gynecologists have more than 3 transfer experience in their working life. See, these variables are in categorical scale, nominal scale, and which will give a cross star, which include n number of columns, n number of rows, and this cross table is having number of cells in which we have frequencies only. What is 15? What is 48? What is 18? What is 3? What is 46? What is 130? These are the frequency distribution. So the categorical scale or nominal scale variable will give only frequency distribution in the cross star having different size. And such scale variable, that means categorical scale variable, will not give normal distribution. There is no basic assumption about the distribution of data relating to a particular variable, because here we use nominal scale or categorical scale. Therefore, if we use nominal scale or categorical scale variable, we have no distribution to start with. Therefore, there are separated categories of statistical texts called distribution test only for the application for the testing of hypothesis relating to two variables that are in categorical scale or nominal scale. And such tests are called a distribution free test, otherwise called a non-parametric test. Otherwise called a non-parametric test. So there is a question, what is the difference between parametric test and non-parametric test? That is very important for your examination of coursework. And non-parametric tests are those tests which have no assumptions relating to the parent population that it is null. So that is the importance of normal distribution in the testing of hypothesis. What is normal distribution? Suppose in your department 250 students are studying. I have to select 100 students by the application of any method, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Based on the information furnished by 100 students, definitely at the time of getting the data analyzed, I have a value. Maybe I applied descriptive statistics or parametric test or non-parametric test, whatever it may be. I have a value based on 100 students. Maybe descriptive statistics. I can calculate the average marks obtained by selected 100 students in their qualifying examination. I have a value. Again, I select another 100 students from the same population. There may be a possibility of the inclusion of some of the students in my first sample, because I select the students at random. Again, I calculate average marks. And the third time, I select another 100 students and calculate the average marks. if I repeat that experiment 100 times, definitely I may have 100 average values. And if I plot these values in the graph, definitely it will create a bell-shaped curve. And this is the importance of normal distribution in sampling and also in testing a hypothesis. Such a normal distribution will not be created by the nominal scale variable upon which we collect the data. The nominal scale and ordinal ranking scale variable will give only frequency distribution. It will not create normal distribution. So that is why we will apply non-parametric tests. Suppose if such a data relating to that variable creates normal distribution, definitely we can apply for the parametric test. So there is a difference between parametric and non-parametric test that is very important for your examination. And here, in order to test the association or relationship between these two variables, number of transfers, type of hospital, two variables that are in categorical nature, which will give a crosstalk in which we have many columns and rows, which creates so many cells, in which we have frequency distribution. And we find out whether these two variables are related or associated together. Therefore, the null hypothesis we formulated here is there is no significant dependence between the type of hospital and number of transfers. There is no significant relation or association between the type of hospital and number of transfers. And this hypothesis is tested by using chi-square because the chi-square is one of the non-parametric tests, distribution-free tests that can be applied for testing the dependency or association or relationship between two variables that are in categorical scale or nominal scale. So here the chi-square value is 152.021 and the p-value for the determination of the significance is 0.00. That means the chi-square value is significant. Therefore, we reject and accept that there is a strong relationship between this. Definitely, you must think about the nature of the scale to be used for data collection that must be clearly constructed in your questionnaire or interview schedule. The scale you use will determine the appropriate statistical method for, and in your analysis, actually you test the dependency or testation or creation of the population for which there are different statistical tests available, and the coursework, the application of such technique is not necessary. The base of analysis, the characteristics of analysis, and what are the important points to be kept in your mind at the time of analyzing the data for getting meaningful conclusion relating to the solution to the research problem. So I will stop here, and you can ask any question. I will explain, please.
Thank you, sir, for the very informative session. Dear participants, this is the time for discussion. Anybody is having queries, please raise your hand.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, audible.
Sir, in your presentation, you mentioned that probability sampling is better than non-probability sampling. And I have heard in an open debate that judgment sampling is biased, and someone said it's not ideal to use. Is it like that we should avoid using non-probability sampling during our research?
Sumesh, your question is very important. Many research scholars has applied non-probability sampling. So what is the consequence of the application of non-probability sampling for the selection of the sample from the population? If you select your sample without applying the probability, there is a theory which says that application of relevant statistical technique is restricted only to probability sampling. If you have applied a non-probability sampling, the application of statistical technique is not valid. Why? The application of a statistical technique definitely tells you the probability of getting something. The chi-square value is this. What is the probability for getting the value chi-square? When you select your sampling without having the application of probability, the probability interpretation is not meaningful in your result. That is why theory says that, and expert says that, you select your sample at random, then only we can apply appropriate statistical tests for getting meaningful conclusion, which clearly specify you the probability of getting the result more meaningful. So that is why probability techniques are more powerful than non-probability sampling. Okay, Sumesh?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
What is Likkert's rating scale? See, 5-point scale used for measuring the satisfaction. If we say that I am highly satisfied, definitely you will put a score of 5. If you put a score of 5 against your that level, highly satisfied,
Sorry,
definitely.
Humor, sorry. Session കഴിഞ്ഞോ സാറേ?
കഴിഞ്ഞു, ഞാൻ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ്റെ ആൻസർ പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുക. എന്താ കൃഷ്ണ? കൃഷ്ണ, ഹലോ കൃഷ്ണ.
ഹലോ. സാറേ സോറി, ഞാൻ എന്റെ സൗണ്ട് ഓഫ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു സാറേ, അറിഞ്ഞില്ല. സോറി. കഴിഞ്ഞോ സാറേ?
സെക്ഷൻ കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഞാൻ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ്റെ ആൻസർ പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു.
ഓ ശരി ശരി ശരി. സോറി. ക്യാരി ഓൺ സർ പ്ലീസ്.
Okay. So that question, once again you ask that question.
Sir, Likkert's rating scale.
Yes. So job satisfaction, this is a qualitative variable. When we use interval scale for the measurement, suppose you are highly satisfied. If we use 5-point Likert scale, that particular level, definitely that can be given a score of 5. If we put a score of 5 against that level, definitely your satisfaction is quantified. So this is the way in which interval scale is used for the measurement. That is why interval scale is exclusively used for measurement of a qualitative variable. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Sir, there is one more question in the chat box. Sir, please explain meta-analysis.
So meta-analysis is not a statistical technique. And it is based on certain theory and observation already taken from the literature review. Not the application of some of the statistical method. Yes.
Does any of you have any more questions, please?
Sir, So while
Yes.
explaining multi-stage random sampling technique, you said that first the whole Kerala is divided into 3 zones. Then we further select certain banks. On what basis we select the banks further, sir?
Basically, in that example, the customer satisfaction of private and public sector bank. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
one bank of public sector banks and one bank of private sector bank have been selected in the second stage, I think.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Then one branch of each bank selected under private and public in the third stage. And after the third stage, the biggest population is converted into targeted population from where we select our optimal sample size. There is no particular base because we select at random. If you apply the probability for the selection of the sample from the population, what is the criteria? There is no criteria. That is why it is called a selected at random, selection at random. Selection at random need not get any criteria. That means any units can be included, and that is the relevance of randomness. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
If there is no more questions, now I invite Sumesh S., Research Scholar, SD College, Alappuzha, to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Jibil. Respected Dr. Harikumar PN, Professor, Department of Commerce, University of Kerala, Dr. Krishnan M., Head of the Department of Commerce, SD College, Alappuzha, other faculty members, and my dear participants. Good morning, all. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this event. First of all, I would like to uh, thank Dr. P.N. Harikumar for his enriching presentation and making this session very fruitful. Dr. Harikumar sir is a very busy person with lot of academic and non-academic responsibilities. But even in his busy schedule, he made himself available for the session. The slides and the presentation was very informative. He also mentioned a number of expected questions during his presentation, which I am sure would be of great help to all research scholars who are attending the coursework examination. I myself feel enlightened since I have exam next month. So once again, I extend a wholehearted gratitude on behalf of Team Commerce and all other participants to Harikumar sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to thank Dr. Krishnan M. Next, I would like to thank Dr. Krishnan M., Head Department of Commerce, for being a guiding spirit throughout the conduct of this event. He is a person who is dedicated towards the betterment of department and college. Thank you, sir, for being such an encouragement. Thank you. I would also like to thank all other faculty members, Department of Commerce, SD College, Alappuzha, for their cooperation and support throughout. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all my co-scholars and participants without whom the program wouldn't have been a success. Thank you all. Hope all you had analyzed the session well. Once again, thank you all.
Thank you, Sumesh.
Thank you very much.
ഹരികുമാർ സാറേ
All the participants.
Thank you.
Oh,
ഞാൻ വിളിക്കാം സാർ
okay, sir.
ശരി.
Okay, sir.
Dear participants, the next session will start on 3 p.m. Thank you.
എവിടൊക്കെയായിരുന്നു പാളിപ്പോയത്?